Hey, Mike here. I just wanted to let you know that you can listen to Dark Poutine early and ad-free on Amazon Music, included with Prime. Welcome back to Dark Poutine. I am Mike Brown.
And I am Matthew.
You definitely are, Matthew. So this is a case that I've wanted to cover for quite some time for a number of reasons.
Interesting.
As many of our listeners know, we usually avoid cases which involve the murder of children.
Mm-hmm.
It makes both of us really sad, and we don't want to make our listeners sad listening to us be sad. But this case is a little different, as you will find out.
Because there is more than one victim in this.
So we've got a two-part story for the first time in a while. This is episode 1.
The views, information, and opinions expressed during the Dark Poutine podcast are solely those of the producer and do not necessarily represent those of Curious Cast, its affiliate, Global News, nor their parent company, Chorus Entertainment.
Dark Poutine is not for the faint of heart or squeamish. Our content is often intense, and some listeners may find it disturbing. We're not experts on the topics we present, nor are we journalists. We are ordinary Canadian schmucks chatting about crime and the dark side of history. Let's get to it. Put on your toque, grab yourself a double-double and a Nanaimo bar. It's time to scarf down some Dark Poutine.
You are responsible for obtaining and maintaining at your own cost all equipment needed to listen to Dark Poutine. Dark Poutine can be addictive. Side effects may include, but not be limited to, pausing and questioning the system, elevated heart rate, pondering humanity, odd looks from colleagues as you laugh out loud at work, family members not into true crime worrying about you. Positive side effects may include some perspectives and opinions that you disagree with, as well as some wokeness and empathy. If you don't think Dark Poutine is for you, consult your doctor immediately.
Queensville, Ontario, October 3rd, 1984. The school bus came down Leslie Street at 3:45 in the afternoon. A 9-year-old girl stepped off. She was small, wearing a blue jacket, carrying a recorder she had gotten from her teacher that day. Her name on a strip of masking tape stuck to the side of it, Christine Jessop. She patted the neighbor's dog, collected the mail, walked to the corner store for a piece of gum, and headed back across the intersection toward home. A man named Robert Atkinson spotted her at the corner. He noted the recorder. I wonder if she'll play us a tune, he thought. That was the last confirmed sighting of Christine Jessop. 45 minutes later, her mother Janet arrived home with Christine's brother Ken. Christine's bike was lying on its side in the yard. Christine's jacket was hung up in an odd spot, and her school bag was on the counter, but there was no sign of her anywhere. The family dog was cowering. At 7 o'clock, after hours of waiting for the 9-year-old's return, Janet called the police. A massive but fruitless search was undertaken that night with scores of professional and volunteer searchers participating. There were 3 months of silence, and then on New Year's Eve came a horrible end to the search. Christine was found deceased. Her decomposed body lay beside a little used path in a field. Investigators recorded the facts plainly. She'd been sexually assaulted and stabbed multiple times. Death had likely occurred close to the day she disappeared. The case was transferred to the Durham Regional Police, and in the minds of 2 detectives a theory was already forming. The man they were looking at lived next door. You're listening to Dark Poutine episode 428, Part 1. Justice Prolonged. The Murder of Christine Jessop. Queensville, Ontario sits about 50 kilometres north of Toronto, in that narrow band of countryside that in 1984 was making its last stand against the city's expanding edge. The land that would become Queensville sat within territory long occupied by the Wendat Teonantati before the mid-1600s and later by the Anishinaabe, ancestors of the Chippewas of Georgina Island, who lived in the Lake Simcoe region for generations before the arrival of settlers. The Crown formally acquired the area through a series of poorly documented agreements, later renegotiated by the Williams Treaties of 1923, which the Chippewas of Georgina Island signed nearly 140 years after settlers first began clearing the land. The old-timers had been there for generations, descendants of settlers who came up from Pennsylvania and New England in the early 1980s. They cleared the rocks and built farms on land granted by the government of Upper Canada. In 1845, a place called Hackett's Corners was renamed in honor of Queen Victoria. The heart of the village was the intersection of Leslie Street and the Queensville Side Road, anchored by the general store, the fire hall, the community center, and the ballpark. Beyond those four edges, farms pressed in from every direction. By 1984, Queensville was expanding. New subdivisions, Balmoral and Grand Court, attracted families who had left the city seeking quiet space and old values. The old-timers watched it happen with a mix of resignation and suspicion. One man, a local named Don Lewis, put it plainly: Queensville was still kind of a redneck community. The Jessops fit into neither world neatly. They'd come from Richmond Hill under difficult circumstances. Bob Jessop had been caught stealing from two elderly people in his care. He'd held power of attorney over a 75-year-old man named John Bullock and his sister Edith Maas, and had helped himself to their money to cover his own mortgage. He paid back $33,000, but it wasn't enough to keep him out of court. He pleaded guilty to fraud. On September 17, 1984, a judge sentenced him to 18 months in jail. Bob had represented himself, convinced he'd get probation. He was wrong. So when autumn came to Queensville later that year, Janet Jessop was running the household alone. She'd told neighbors Bob was away on a long business trip to California. Christine was 9 years old. Her adopted brother, Ken, was 14. Christine Marion Jessop was born on November 29, 1974. A difficult birth, a sickly infant who spent much of her early years in and out of the hospital. She was small, barely 40 pounds when she disappeared. Her grade 3 teacher described her as a chirpy little thing like an elf. She even looked like one. Janet, in the years that followed, described her daughter as happy, sensitive, lively, and a caring child who loved school and sports, particularly baseball. That last summer of her life, Christine had played catcher on a softball team her father helped coach. Nobody could find a bat small enough for her to grip. She played behind the plate anyway. She was feisty. That was Ken's word for her. She could be shy around strangers, but at home she debated, took positions, and fought hard. She and Ken called each other Meathead and Bucko. They fought the way siblings do, and they also loved each other the way siblings do. On the morning of October 3rd, 1984, Janet and Ken left the house together. Janet was going to visit Bob in prison. She'd agreed to let Ken skip school and come along. As she hustled out the door, Janet called back to Christine to say she was going to visit Dad in jail, that she was taking Kenny to the dentist, and that they might be home by 4, but might not. Christine went to school. Janet and Ken arrived home sometime after 4 in the afternoon. Christine's things were there. Her bike was on its side in the shed, and her school bag was on the kitchen counter. But her jacket was hung high up on a peg that little Christine would not have been able to reach. and the family dog Freckles seemed as though he was frightened of something. Ken went to his room and put on music. Janet made herself a coffee and called her lawyer about a financial matter. Phone records would later confirm that call at 4:49 p.m. Janet then walked down to the park to look for Christine. She stopped at the general store for cigarettes and found no sign of her daughter in the village. She came home and put supper on, worried. She placed Christine's portion in the oven to keep warm. Something was wrong. When Janet called the police, the officer who took the call ran through the standard suggestions. Check under the bed, look in the cupboards, she may be hiding. The sergeant who handled it had a different instinct. He sent a car immediately. 18 minutes later, a constable pulled into the Jessop driveway, and within hours, 50 officers and volunteers were moving through the fields, the graveyard, and the cornfields surrounding the house. The volunteer fire chief, Lorne Smith, organized much of it himself. They searched through the night. They found nothing. Police later discovered that Leslie Chipman, Christine's friend, had arranged a play date with Christine that day. She waited at the park with her Cabbage Patch doll for her buddy to show up. Christine never came, and Leslie rode home alone. The search for Christine continued for days, then weeks. York Regional Police combed Christine's circle of friends, her habits, the roads around Queensville. They knocked on every door. They checked wells. They followed many tips. Bob Jessop, still locked up in the Toronto East Detention Centre, compiled lists of people he knew and handed them to investigators through glass in the visiting room. Christmas came and went. Janet and Ken spent Christmas Eve ladling food at the Scott Mission in Toronto. The search had by then generated one of the largest missing person investigations in Canadian history, and it had produced nothing. Christine's Christmas gifts went unopened. On New Year's Eve that year, a man named Fred Patterson was out near the 4th Concession in Sunderland, a community in the Durham region 56 kilometers east of Queensville. He looked off the side of a tractor path and saw clothing and what appeared to be bones. Detective Bernie Fitzpatrick of Durham Regional Police was among the first up the path. He wrote in his notebook, quote, "I observed what I felt to be the body of a female child. Only the lower half of the body was there. It appeared the upper portion of the body had been eaten as only bones remained." End quote. In the grass nearby lay a recorder. The masking tape label identified its owner, Christine Jessop, in careful letters. The body was on its back, decomposed, legs spread apart in an unnatural position, knees spread outward. Animals had eaten at the legs. An autopsy determined she had been stabbed in the chest. Semen was found on her underwear. A coroner concluded the body had been lying there for 3 to 4 months, meaning Christine had almost certainly died on or near the day she disappeared. On January 7, 1985, in a blizzard, Christine Jessop was buried in the cemetery at the top of Leslie Street, the same cemetery behind the family home where she used to play. She was laid to rest with 50 red roses and her Cabbage Patch doll. The case passed from York Regional Police to Durham Regional Police, and the investigation turned its attention to someone nearby. The house next door to the Jessops had belonged to the Moran family since 1978. Alphonse and Ida Moran had raised 6 children, and by October 1984, only the youngest son remained at home. His name was Guy Paul Moran. He was 23 years old, pale-skinned, with jet black hair, solidly built from years of working with his hands. His trade was woodworking. His hobbies were beekeeping, home renovation, and music. He played the clarinet and the saxophone and belonged to 3 community bands. He had no criminal record. On October 3, 1984, his time card showed he left work at 3:32 in the afternoon. He stopped to buy groceries on the way home. According to his account, he came through the front door around 4:15, spoke briefly with his brother-in-law who was on his way out, put the groceries away, and went for his habitual late afternoon nap while his mother made dinner. That evening, when police came to the Moran house to speak to Ida, Guy Paul was in the room. He sat quietly. A constable later noted that Moran had stared straight ahead, showing no apparent interest in the conversation. That observation was recorded and filed. Later that night, Guy Paul did walk over to speak to Ken Jessop, who had come to the door asking if he'd seen Christine. Moran told him no. Ken wondered why Moran wasn't joining the search for his sister. Moran eventually did go out to the graveyard briefly, a few minutes, thinking Christine might have fallen into a freshly dug grave, as a dog of his once had. He found nothing. He went home. As he put it later, quote, "There were comings and goings all night long. Lots of people were around talking for hours and hours, and I had to go to work the next day." End quote. The investigation spent the autumn running down hundreds of leads. It produced nothing conclusive. Then, on Valentine's Day 1985, Durham detectives Fitzpatrick and Shepard sat down with Janet Jessop for another interview. Fitzpatrick asked what she thought about the people next door. Janet described Guy Paul as the weird one. She said he was a loner whose only company was his dogs, his clarinet, and his sunflowers. She couldn't point to anything specific, but he looked odd. He was still living at home. Fitzpatrick wrote in his notebook, quote, "Paul Moran, clarinet player, weird type guy," end quote.
One of the things that bothers me about this case is that I kind of see a strain of anti-intellectualism or anti-creative or anti-different running through it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Guy Paul Moran he wasn't a gang member. He wasn't violent. He wasn't running around threatening people, right? He played clarinet. He kept bees. He grew sunflowers. And somehow that gets translated into being a suspect.
Just because he's a little different.
There are moments in reading this file where I find myself wondering whether some investigators were looking at evidence or whether they were looking at a man they simply just didn't understand.
Yep, totally.
You know, anti-intellectual or anti-creative or just being different. This is one of these social poisons that never really goes away. The idea that people who might be thoughtful or artistic or scholarly or a little bit different must somehow be suspect.
Yep.
That if a person doesn't share your interests or your tastes or your way of moving through the world, then there must be something wrong with them. We've seen versions of that mentality throughout history, and we'll still see it today, not just in politics or on social media. We kind of see it everywhere. You know, that moment where I don't understand this person becomes, therefore this person is dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
And when that happens, you're not evaluating evidence. You're evaluating tribes, and that's a terrible way to investigate a murder.
100%, yep.
And, you know, I've also seen earlier, you said, you know, the suspicion that he didn't join the search. Like that's some indication of guilt. Not everybody joins searches.
Nope.
And you know what? They don't need to provide you with a reason of why they don't, period.
Mm-hmm.
As much as you want the world to stop because something's happened to you or your family, it just simply doesn't. Right from the get-go, just because this guy plays clarinet, keeps bees, like why would a cop plays clarinet? Weird guy in his note just shows me what type of cop that is. He's not like a beer-drinking dude that would go hunting with me, right? Like, just go away.
So not to make this about me and my experiences. Oh, boy. But I had a similar experience to this when I was on The Traitors, Season 2. I marched to the beat of my own drum. I'm myself pretty much all of the time, as much as I can be. I know I'm a bit different. It's caused me some trouble in the past. But on Traitors, some of those people were like, I don't get you. What are you all about? And if you watch the show, that made me a target. I was early on considered a suspect in that game.
Yeah, you're just not a shallow fuck that wants desperately to be these like social media. Anyway.
I really didn't care if I won, which I think also threw people. So I was just there for the experience and the experiment of it. And I learned a lot.
Yeah.
Please don't get me wrong, I'm not comparing myself to what Guy Paul Morin is about to go through, but I kind of understand it on a smaller scale, I guess.
Yeah.
If you don't fit in, there be doom a-coming. So, with all this in mind, police set up surveillance on the Morin home 4 days later. On February 22nd, 2 officers interviewed Guy Paul Morin directly. The FBI had ordered a profile of the perpetrator. Special Agent John Douglas, famous for his book Mindhunter, the inspiration for the Netflix series of the same name, of the Bureau's National Center for the Analysis of Violent Crime, had visited Toronto in March 1985. Douglas met with the detectives, toured the Jessop property and the body site, and delivered his conclusions on tape. The profile described a killer in his late teens or early 20s living close to the victim who had probably known Christine and may have been the person she sought out to show her new recorder. The killer had panicked. The scattered, disorganized stab wounds suggested someone who lost control of the situation rather than a calculated predator. He was probably a night owl who slept during the day, worked in physical labor or a technical trade, and preferred his own company. Fitzpatrick and Shepard read it as pointing straight across the driveway. Guy Paul Morin was in the right age range, lived next door, worked as a finishing sander, kept unusual hours, and largely kept to himself. What the profile also said, and what received less emphasis, was that the killer likely had a criminal record involving offenses like arson or breaking and entering, that he would probably be unkempt and physically unattractive, and that he would have inserted himself into the search for Christine in an overly cooperative way. Morin had no criminal record, and by every account he was neat and presentable, and he was far from inserting himself into the search. In fact, he'd spent most of that night at home. The author of the book on the case, Redrum Kirk Mackin, notes the profile had, in his words, an odor of convenience. Both John Douglas and Durham police insisted it had been constructed without any information about their chief suspect. Whether that was true or not, the investigators had what they needed. During a subsequent interview with Fitzpatrick and Shepard, Morin said something that stopped them cold. The tape recorder ran out of tape at that moment, exactly 45 minutes into one side of a 90-minute cassette, and only Shepard's handwritten notes recorded what followed. According to those notes, Morin had said, quote, "All little girls are sweet and beautiful, but they grow up to be corrupt," end quote. From that comment, Fitzpatrick and Shepard concluded they had their man.
So isn't it super convenient that the tape recorder ran out just before he supposedly said this?
Right.
Maybe he said it, but my guess is, knowing how this case was handled and what these cops did, that he probably didn't say that.
Yeah, we'll never know.
Even if he had, it's not evidence.
Nope.
And that's exactly why investigators are supposed to be careful about attaching too much significance to things that they can't independently verify. What bothers me isn't the possibility that Morin said something odd. People say things odd all the time. What bothers me is how quickly this supposedly unrecorded statement seems to become another brick in the wall that was already being built against him.
Exactly.
Because once you've decided somebody's your suspect, ambiguity starts feeling like certainty. An alleged comment becomes evidence, a coincidence becomes evidence, a personality trait becomes evidence, and before long, the distinction between what you know and what you believe starts to disappear. And that's human nature. But police training is all about evidence. They are not trained to go on their human nature. They're not trained to rest on how they feel or if they like somebody. This is just poor police work from the get-go.
Yeah, this is a very famous case, and despite my attempt to keep it a mystery throughout, it's very obvious what happens in this one. In hindsight now, we see the train that's coming for Guy Paul Morin. So on the evening of April 22nd, 1985, police executed a search warrant on the Morin home. At the same time, Guy Paul was intercepted as he was heading out for a community band practice. He was brought in for questioning. He gave samples of his hair, blood, and saliva voluntarily without a lawyer present. He maintained his innocence through 6 hours of interrogation. He was then charged with the first-degree murder of Christine Jessop. Denied bail, Guy Paul Moran sat in Whitby jail for 10 months before his trial began. He had no criminal record, a time card that made the timeline of the murder nearly impossible for him to have committed, and a 6-hour interrogation in which he never wavered. What he did have waiting for him in a courtroom in Newmarket was hair evidence, fiber evidence, and 2 men who claim they heard him confess in the middle of the night. We'll be right back. And we are back at the halfway point, Matthew. Any thoughts?
Yeah, so I think what stands out to me at this point is how powerful the desire for an answer can be.
Yeah.
You know, Christine Jessop is gone.
Yep, a beautiful little girl.
I was 14, right? You know, in my own little world as a 14-year-old, but like this was news all over the place, right?
It was massive news.
The little girl has been murdered. Her family obviously is devastated. An entire community is frightened.
Terrified.
And at this point, when this happens, uncertainty is incredibly uncomfortable.
Especially when there's the death of a child involved.
Yeah, and we talk a lot about the presumption of innocence, but very few people talk about the psychological pressure that exists in a case like this. Everybody wants the same thing. The family wants answers, the community wants answers, the media wants answers, and the police want answers, or at least the pressure off of them to find answers, right?
Yeah.
And that's when a suspect can become more than a suspect. They can become relief.
So Guy Paul Moran becomes the relief valve for the police.
Yeah, or for the family, or for the community, right? Because once you believe you found the person responsible, all that certainty finally has somewhere to go. And your fear has somewhere to go, and your anger has somewhere to go, and your grief has somewhere to go.
Yeah.
But the problem, of course, is that wanting an answer and having the right answer are not the same thing.
Yeah, those 2 things aren't always congruent, no.
And history is full of cases where people confuse the two.
The trial of Guy Paul Moran opened on January 7, 1986, in a courtroom in Newmarket, Ontario. It had been exactly 1 year since Christine Jessop was buried in the cemetery adjacent to her home. The prosecutors were John Scott and Susan McLean. The defense was led by Clayton Ruby, one of the most formidable criminal lawyers in the country, with assistance from Mary Bartley. In his opening address, Scott described Moran luring Christine from her home under the guise of teaching her to play her new recorder. He promised many pieces of evidence linking Moran to the crime. Moran sat in the prisoner's dock and listened. The forensic evidence came from the Centre for Forensic Sciences in Toronto. Analyst Stephanie Niznik testified about hair and fiber comparisons. A single dark hair found embedded in skin tissue on Christine's necklace was said to be microscopically similar to Moran's hair and could have originated from him. 3 hairs found in Moran's car were said to be similar to Christine's. Several fibers collected from Christine's clothing and her recorder case were described as consistent with materials found at the Moran home and in the car. This kind of evidence needs context to be understood. Microscopic hair and fiber comparison does not work like DNA. It produces no statistical probability. The language used, consistent with, and could have come from, tells a jury that the material cannot be excluded as a match. It does not tell them it came from the accused. What juries often hear and what Niznik's relaxed, confident testimony encouraged was something closer to certainty than the science could support. Clayton Ruby understood this. He spent hours methodically dismantling Niznik's testimony, walking through every possible innocent explanation for how fibers from a family who shared a fence line, a dog, and a driveway could end up on the clothing of a child who lived next door. He established that the police had never tested fibers from the Jessop home or car for comparison. He asked how many fibers had been examined in total. From hundreds of thousands of fibers in the Moran car, Niznik found 5 that were consistent with fibers found on Christine. 5. And consistent with. Ruby also documented improper handling of physical evidence at the body site. A cigarette butt recovered near Christine's remains had been linked to a police constable who claimed he had dropped it. Ruby brought a pack of the cigarettes the constable claimed to smoke into the court and placed them side by side. The brand on exhibit was not the same brand. The filter was different, the rings were different, and the constable had named the wrong cigarette. Ruby's theory went directly to the integrity of the investigation. He said that the original butt had been replaced to explain away evidence that pointed away from a smoking suspect. Guy Paul Morin was a non-smoker. Then came the jailhouse informants. 2 inmates from Whitby Jail testified that they had heard Morin confess in the night. The first, known in court documents only as Mr. X, was serving time for sexual assault. The second was Robert Dean May, 22 years old, who'd led a jailbreak, assaulted a guard, escaped twice, and was facing serious charges of his own when he approached Durham police with an offer. Ruby revealed that both men had been offered leniency in their own cases in return for their testimony. He put the actual transcript of Mr. X's negotiations with the police into evidence. It showed a man bargaining for his freedom, not a reluctant witness burdened by what he'd heard. And we all know how incarcerated people feel about other folks charged with crimes against children. Morin's time card remained the most concrete fact in the case. He had clocked out at 3:32 p.m. Ruby argued plainly that the timeline made what the Crown was alleging close to impossible. For Morin to have abducted Christine, driven her 56 kilometers, assaulted and killed her, returned home, cleaned himself of what would have been considerable blood, put groceries away, and appeared sufficiently normal that his mother and brother-in-law noticed nothing, all of this in under an hour, strained any reasonable belief. Ruby's closing address to the jury lasted 2 hours. Those who witnessed it later described it as one of the finest pieces of courtroom advocacy they had seen. His theme was simple. A whole host of unusual things had occurred in this investigation, and the jury should ask why. He told them that the strongest thing against Morin was that he lived next door, and he was different. Those 2 facts together, he said, were not evidence of murder. Quote, "You wouldn't hang a dog on this evidence," he said. Scott's closing address, delivered without notes, was widely described as a disaster. The contrast between the 2 men that day was, by most accounts, the difference between a conviction and an acquittal. On February 7, 1986, the jury returned a verdict of not guilty. Morin walked out of court after 10 months of pretrial custody. Outside in the snow, he told reporters, quote, "I've gone through a lot, and it was all for something I haven't done," end quote. In the Crown's office downstairs, John Scott blamed himself for the loss. The police wept. Ken Jessop had to be carried out of the building by his parents.
You know, that reaction tells us something. By this point, a lot of people weren't thinking of Guy Paul as a suspect anymore. In their minds, he was the guy. You know, the case had been built. The story made sense. The pieces had been assembled. And then 12 jurors came back and said they weren't convinced. That's why this reaction was so emotional, because the people who believed he was guilty didn't experience this as a jury rejecting a case, right? They experienced it as a killer walking free.
Yep.
And once people become absolutely convinced that they found the right person, any challenge to that belief can start to feel like an injustice itself.
Yep.
Even when that's exactly what the justice system is supposed to do.
Yep. Well, within weeks, the Crown filed an appeal. Between the acquittal in February 1986 and the opening of a new trial, 6 years passed. They were 6 years in which 2 families shared a fence line and a mutual hatred in Queensville, in which Janet Jessop told local newspapers that she knew Morin did it, and he knew she knew. The Ontario Ministry of the Attorney General declined to prosecute her for contempt, but conceded the comments were a flagrant display of criminal contempt for the judicial process. They didn't want to hurt a grieving mom. The Morans documented every horn honk and every provocation in Alphonse's diary, and Guy Paul sanded furniture and tended his beehives and went to band practice 3 nights a week. In late 1989, the approaching trial wore Ken Jessop down completely. He suffered a breakdown and spent 6 weeks in hospital, blaming the grinding dread of what the Crown would expose in court. He dried out at a clinic in Minnesota. He drove trucks. He worked the doors at bars in Peterborough. He was not a well man. Guy Paul Moran's second trial opened on May 28, 1990. The venue was Windsor, Ontario. The Toronto area jury pool deemed too poisoned by years of saturation coverage. The lead prosecutor was Leo McGuigan, a legend in Ontario criminal law, blunt and methodical, hand-picked for the exact opponent he would face. The lead defense counsel was Jack Pinkowski, whom author Kirk Mackin described as obsessive, relentless, and constitutionally incapable of leaving any stone unturned. They had fought each other for years. What followed became the longest murder trial in Canadian history at the time. 9 months of evidence, 130 witnesses, and a bill the public was footing because of a press conference the Durham police had staged years earlier to rattle their suspect. Before the jury even heard a word of evidence, Pinkowski spent months battling for disclosure of police reports that Clayton Ruby had never received. The process became something close to a commission of inquiry in its own right. What tumbled out of the Durham files was striking. There were reports pointing to viable alternative suspects the police had never seriously investigated. There were documented inconsistencies in the Crown's timeline. There were 3 neighbors near the body site who had heard screams the night of the abduction, well after the time it was established that Guy Paul Moran was already home. This was information never disclosed to the defense at the first trial, and there was the timeline itself. In the first days after Christine's disappearance, Janet and Ken had both confirmed in 4 separate interviews that they arrived home around 4:10 p.m. on October 3rd. Moran's time card showed he couldn't have been home before 4:14. If the Jessops were right about 4:10, Moran had almost a handful of minutes in which Christine vanished from a home on a ridge, with his parents directly next door and their dogs that barked at everything that moved. Over time, as Fitzpatrick and Shepard ran repeated interviews with the family, the arrival time shifted. By the retrial, the Jessops' recollection had moved to 4:30 or 4:35. That gave the Crown a window. Pinkowski, armed now with Bell telephone records confirming that Janet had called her lawyer at 4:49, exactly when a pre-scheduled call was due, argued plainly that if her clock had been wrong, so was the telephone company's. The new wave of Crown witnesses described Moran's behavior after Christine's disappearance as detached, uncaring, and strange. Some had not come forward at the first trial. Some remembered things differently now than they had in 1984 or 1985. A later explanation of how this happened would find that the interview techniques used by investigators were not designed to produce unreliable evidence, but nonetheless had that effect. Robert Dean May returned. He again testified that he heard Moran make a midnight confession in Whitby jail. Pinkowski played the tape recording of May and Moran talking the following day. On it, May circled Moran repeatedly, probing for an admission, getting nothing but a man who kept asserting his innocence. In 1993, May would begin telling friends he had fabricated the confession entirely. Of course he had. A judge would eventually declare him a dangerous offender, a psychopath, an incorrigible liar who forcibly confined and terrorized former girlfriends who had tried to leave him. But that information was not available to the jury at Moran's second trial. Then came the evidence involving Ken Jessop. During the lengthy pretrial disclosure motion, Pinkowski had obtained police reports containing deeply disturbing information about Ken. These facts, relevant or not, had been buried in the police file. Pinkowski used this material at the retrial to suggest that investigators had built a fabricated case against an eccentric neighbor while other, more viable suspects went uninvestigated. The judge ruled that the material could be put before the jury only in a limited form and repeatedly warned that Ken Jessop was not to be considered a suspect. That limitation may have backfired. At least one juror later said that raising the issue at all appeared to be a slurring tactic and it damaged the defense's credibility rather than advancing it. The effect on Ken Jessop himself was devastating. Having that chapter of his life put before a jury, then misrepresented in media coverage, tore him apart. In the days and weeks that followed his testimony, he deteriorated badly. He had already twice attempted suicide in the years leading up to this point, a fact that Janet disclosed publicly after the appeal was ordered. He was not a man with much left to give. McGuigan's closing address lasted 4 days. On the final day, he and his co-counsel, Susan McLean, erected a display board in the courtroom. At the top, photographs of Moran, his car, and the Jessop home. Then, one by one, acetate sheets overlaid on the board, each one connecting a fiber or hair on Christine's clothing to the Moran car or the Moran home, represented by a red ribbon. By the time they finished, a web of ribbon lines bound Moran to Christine. McGuigan called them matches. Each juror looked at the display many times over the hours that followed. Pinkowski's closing ran long, too long, and ended abruptly. By most accounts, he failed to land the wrap-up that the 9 months of evidence deserved. The jury deliberated for 8 days. On the morning of July 30th, 1992, they returned. None of them looked at Guy Paul Moran as they filed in. The foreman stood, quote, "We find the accused guilty of first-degree murder," end quote. Detective Fitzpatrick lurched forward. Janet Jessop allowed herself a wide smile. Moran gripped the railing of the prisoner's dock. He looked up at Judge Donnelly. Quote, "I am not guilty of this crime," he said. "It is a travesty of justice, what has happened here today and throughout this whole ordeal, and I'm appealing this verdict." End quote. Guy Paul Moran had maintained his innocence from the beginning, through everything that had been thrown at him. One jury believed him, a second, given a different picture, different witnesses, a shifted timeline, and the same jailhouse informant, did not.
Look at what's happening here. The facts haven't changed. This poor little girl is still dead. Guy Paul is still saying he's innocent. The same man is standing in the courtroom facing the same accusation. Those are the facts that remain. What changed was the story presented around the fact. Different witnesses, different emphasis, different interpretation, different timeline. And the result is that one jury says not guilty, the other says guilty. I've always found that quite humbling because it reminds us that juries don't discover truth. They evaluate the version of events they're given.
Exactly.
They don't discover the truth. They evaluate the versions of events that they're given. They're not investigators. And sometimes two groups of totally reasonable people can hear two different versions of the same case and reach completely different conclusions. And that should make us all a little cautious about certainty in court.
The fact was, Matthew, Christine Jessop's killer was not in prison. Next week, we'll hear about the DNA result that changed everything, the public inquiry that named every failure, and the question that stayed open for another 25 years. Who actually killed Christine Jessop, and where had he been all this time? And that's it for Dark Poutine episode 428, Part 1, Justice Prolonged, The Murder of Christine Jessop. That's right, it's time for voicemails. You can leave us a message at 1-877-327-5786 or 1-877-DARK-PTN. We'd love to hear from you. Let's see who called us this week. Alrighty, here is our first voicemail. Matthew?
Hi, this is Austin calling from Edmonton. I'm just your friendly neighborhood Esperanto nerd. I left you guys a voicemail a few years ago telling you to go shit in your hat in Esperanto. Anyway, I was just thinking, I'm pretty sure I've heard every episode so far, and you guys have done some really awesome episodes that took place here in Edmonton. But I'm not sure if you've ever done an episode on the Mindbender roller coaster derailment that happened here in 1986. I think that would actually be a really, really good episode. It's a pretty crazy story. I grew up in Saskatchewan, and I remember even there, lots of people were talking about it quite often. So anyway, I just wanted to suggest that, and I think you guys are doing awesome. Matthew, I really like your new catchphrase about the boiling frogs. That really boils my frog. Anyway, that's it for me. So, feku en vian chapelon. That's Esperanto for go shit in your hat.
Oh, dear.
I love that, Austin. It's like holding on to the Esperanto. It's fantastic. The Mindbender roller coaster.
I am going to add that to my list of things to look into because it sounds interesting.
Killed 3 and injured 19.
Yeah.
You know, my husband, whenever he sees roller coasters, like he's never been on one, he's like, why would anyone do that to themselves? He does not understand.
I am 100% Team Justin on this one, Matthew.
I'm the opposite.
Goodness gracious. Why would anybody want to make themselves feel intentionally terrified and sick at the same time?
I'm the opposite. I'm the person that puts his arms up like, woo! I'm literally the person when there's like really heavy, when you're on an airplane and there's like a lot of turbulence, I like lift my hands up like I'm on a roller coaster going, wee! People look at me strangely.
They look at you that way because you're mentally ill. You really are, Matthew. This is a problem. So what does Austin do there in Edmonton, Matthew? I'm curious what you come up with for this speaker of Esperanto.
He is a roller coaster designer, and his theory on the derailment is that it was because there was international workers and the documents on how to put the roller coaster together were not written in Esperanto. That's why mistakes were made.
The pain. Anyway, let's listen to another voicemail until we dig ourselves a bigger hole. Anyway.
Hi, this is Françoise. I'm a new listener of Dark Poutine, and I'm very, very phone shy, but I listened to the last episode, and I learned that Steve died, and I wanted to offer my condolences, my most sincere sympathy. It's always very hard to lose a member of our family, so I am with you with all my heart, and thank you so much for your good work, guys. I'm gonna pet my dog extra hard today, just in honor of Steve, and it feels wrong to say it, but go shit in your hat. Thank you.
Thank you, Francoise. It's so our little community that I love so much. I posted today about how, you know, I was the MC of a medical conference through somebody who was a fan who became a friend. Like, Dark Poutine has brought me so many friends around the world and opportunities, and the love and support that people have been sharing about Steve has been great. I give his ashes a little hug and say goodnight every night still. And I should probably see a therapist because I cried way more over Steve than I did when my dad died. I don't know what that means. I don't know what that means. But
Yep.
It was hard. It was very hard. It's been about 5 weeks now, I think. And some days are better than others. And, it's interesting. Mike was like, well, where are you sitting when we're doing like a few episodes ago? And I'm like, oh, I'm still at my desk, but the desk is in the middle of the room in a really stupid spot because I kept looking down at where Steve always laid when we were doing this show. Mm-hmm. And I literally couldn't, I needed to rearrange my furniture, right? And anyone who has a dog understands, or a pet, a loved pet, it doesn't have to be a dog. You guys all get this. And I made the mistake of watching a dog movie the other day. I watched Edward the King or something about that dog that went when those adventure runners were running, and that dog joined them, and they had to go back to get him because, it's a good film. But anyway, thank you, Francoise. I think you're an actress.
An actress? Interesting.
Our gorgeous friends in Quebec have been putting up with us Anglophones butchering that language for so long. It's old hat now to them, I'm sure. It's the Canadian duality. We try and we fail with pronunciation.
Honestly, I'm impressed when somebody from Quebec calls in despite my mispronunciation of the word poutine so many times throughout the years. I promise I'm trying to do better, and thank you, Francois. That's it for this week's voicemails. Again, you can leave us one at 1-877-327-5786 or 1-877-DARK-PTN. We'd love to hear from you, even if it is just to say hi and to tell us to go shit in our hats. If you're stumped for what to chat with us about, a quick story is welcome. So our first patron this week is our good friend Taya Couture. Well, thank you, Taya. We know you love us because we see and hear from you all the time in the Umberyard. What does Taya do for a living, Matthew?
I do know what Taya does in real life, but I'm going to make something up. And I'm going to do it with a dog theme. With a name like that, I think she does haute couture clothes for dogs.
Oh, dear. Well, that's fascinating.
little like share outfits for dogs, right?
Oh, no. Oh, I kind of like that.
Thank you, Taya.
We really appreciate it. Next up, we have Patrick Egan. Patrick Egan.
Patrick is it's this really weird thing. He has a biology degree, and he's actually specialist in eggs. Like how eggs are formed, what makes up shells, and he studies eggs around the world. Goes on. He was recently in South America in the middle of the jungle looking for a very difficult to find egg from some bird that there's only like 6 of them left that he wanted to study.
That's really weird.
Yeah.
Also,
thank you, Patrick.
So Patrick and Mary Voutsis. I'm so terrible with names that I've never seen before. I'm really sorry, Mary. But they're from Owego, New York.
Where's Owego, New York?
My gut tells me that it's close to the Canadian border somewhere.
Cool. I've never heard of Owego, New York. Oh, there you go. Look at that. Oh, it looks like a quaint little town, actually. I'm looking it up online. They are near the Corning Museum of Glass.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So Miriam is a glass specialist. So we have an egg specialist and a glass specialist in Owego.
You mean Owego.
Owego, sorry. I made it sound like a video game or a Japanese anime or something.
So there is a patron here that I suspect may be one of our callers from today. It's a very common name in Quebec, but one of our patrons, our new patrons, her name is Francois Dion, and she is from Montreal, Quebec. I don't know. Maybe the same person, maybe. Who knows? She knows.
Francoise Dion. Do you think she's related to Dionne Warwick?
She could be, or Celine Dion, maybe.
No, I think she's related to Dionne Warwick.
Okay, fair enough.
Who is the aunt of...
I don't run in these circles.
You do not know that she was the aunt of our good friend, Whitney Houston.
Really? Our good friend?
Yeah, Dionne Warwick was Whitney Houston's aunt.
Okay, now that you mention it, I did kind of know that.
Okay.
But I'd forgotten it. Yeah.
There you go.
Next, we have Sherry Garrow, Gerrow. Oh, my gosh. I'm so sorry.
Sherry.
Sherry's from the Maritimes in Greenfield, New Brunswick.
Greenfield, New Brunswick.
Yes, and what does Sherry do there in Greenfield, New Brunswick, Matthew? Oh, do tell.
Lead ATV route strategist.
What in the heck is that?
Do you guys do like lots of ATVs in New Brunswick?
I'm from Nova Scotia.
Oh, yeah, I keep forgetting. Sorry.
You're frustrating me.
That's the ongoing joke about where you live and where you're from.
Yeah, definitely the thing, yeah.
But when I say you guys, East Coasters, are you ever feeling your big ATVers?
You are 100% correct, Matthew. I have friends with side-by-sides, and they're racing around the province all the time, every weekend that they can.
We were dirt bikes when in the 70s, but I think a lot of the kids from out in the countryside, even in Ontario where I grew up, are ATVers. But you struck me as being an ATV type. So Sherry is one of my good friends from public school. The name was Sherry, lead ATV route strategist.
Lead ATV route strategist. Well,
so thank you so much for being a Patreon.
Yes, and doing your route strategy.
Sometimes when I give people these jobs, I'm wondering if they have, wouldn't it be weird if they had, actually some connection to doing these things?
It would be weird. It would be really
cool.
Weird. Okay, on to the next one. Wow, they just keep coming this week, and we're grateful. So coming from Interac, we have, oh boy, a big 3-digit donation from Molly Lemley. Wow. Thank you so much, Molly.
Oh, thank you, Molly.
In memory of the goodest egg, Steve. Your show is incredible. Long time, nearly from the start listener, and like a fine wine, you guys get better with age. Keep up the amazing work. Your storytelling is informative and empathetic. Your banter brings a light to the hard topics you cover. Go shit in your hat. With love from the city Matt is convinced Mike lives in. I would say that Molly is definitely in Abbotsford.
Molly lives in Langley then.
No, I live in Langley, but you say Abbotsford.
I know, but now I'm going to place Molly in Langley and you in Abbotsford.
Why do you do this to me?
Just to make her upset.
Matthew.
Yesterday, Friday, I was being the MC of that medical conference, and I was talking to the guy, and he's like, I'm like, what do you have going on? And he's like, it's conference season. I have 3 more over the next 4 days. I have to drive all the way home to Abbotsford. And I said, why don't you just stop and stay at my friend Mike's in Langley? Because I always tease him that it's the same place. He's like, it's whenever I'm getting to about Langley that I wish I was just wishing I was home.
Yep, Langley is as far as you want to go. Yep. Okay, enough of that. So what does Molly do in Abbotsford, Matthew?
She is a Michelin-rated chef.
Oh, really? I didn't know there were any Michelin star restaurants in Abbotsford, Matthew.
Well, she has a little auberge in Abbotsford. Yeah, she does lots of game dishes, so Canadian game.
Like duck and pheasant and things like that?
Yeah, or even venison, right?
Oh, big game.
Yeah.
I'm really hoping she's not a vegan and is completely offended by now. Oh, boy.
Hey, broken clock is right twice a day.
Well, in this case, we pray we haven't offended anybody. Oh, boy. Next, we have another donut money donor named Sonia A. Rockwell. Sonia. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sonia.
So, Matthew, where does Sonia live? Number 1, and what does she do with herself?
Do you know where Strasbourg is? Okay, well, it's in the Alsace region in France.
Okay, yeah, I used to drink Strasbourg beer when I was in Paris. Yeah, I remember it now.
I have a really good Riesling in Alsace, so she has a wine estate.
A wine estate?
Yeah.
Well, there you go. Thank you so much, Sonia. We appreciate you. And from Buy Me a Coffee, we have Lisa Wilson, who says, in honor of Steve. Anyway, I'm feeling a little misty.
Thank you, Lisa.
Where does Lisa live and what does she do, Matthew?
Lisa lives in a farming community and sells farm equipment.
Well, that's not glamorous, but it is definitely can be lucrative.
I'm going to tell you why I said that, because Wilsons were like the farm next to my grandparents. And so whenever I hear the word Wilson, I think big farming family. So there is a weird connection there, just so you know.
Okay, fair enough.
Oh, I didn't say where.
Okay, where does she live?
Curwood.
Curwood, Ontario. I know it well. Not really. Lastly, we have Mary Vuong. Mary Vuong. And Mary says, in memory of good boy Steve.
She lives in Philadelphia.
Oh, what does she do in Philadelphia? Polish the Rocky statue?
No, she owns a cement company. Your name is cemented forever in our hearts now.
Oh, my goodness. Anyway, oh boy. These Patreon and Donut Money donor requests have got me feeling a little sad and missing our friend Steve, and also so tearfully grateful. We really, really appreciate you. Thank you so much, all. Thanks to all our patrons and Donut Money donors, past and present, for your generosity. It helps to keep the show going. You can become a patron of Dark Poutine at patreon.com/darkpoutine. For a one-time donation, you can send us donut money via PayPal or interact using our email address, darkpoutinepodcast@gmail.com. If you don't already subscribe to the show, it would mean a lot if you did. You can easily find Dark Poutine on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows. If you haven't gotten yours yet, my 2 books are available to order via links on the Dark Poutine website or anywhere fine books are sold. And speaking of darkpoutine.com, check it out for show notes and other cool stuff. We'd appreciate it if you gave Dark Poutine a like or a follow on Facebook and Instagram. Most importantly, thank you for listening. Tell your friends about us. Word of mouth is a powerful thing. So until next time, don't forget to be a good egg and not a bad apple. Oh gosh, we love you folks.
Goodbye.